Okay.
For the Philippines this morning. I talked to them at about 1:30. They were waiting for the board.
Okay. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of light. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of light. Get ready, my soul. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've lost or won, everything I've ever dreamed has brought me here to the present moment, here to a new beginning, here, and I'm seeing life so clearly now. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of light. Get ready, my soul. 'Cause here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred soul. Here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred soul. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of light. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul.
So good morning.
Good morning.
I thought I'd start with sort of a, celebration, explanation about where we are with masks. So as was in the newsletter, we're asking, obviously, California has ended its mandatory indoor masking. There is still a recommendation in houses of worship that you wear masks because they're typically very close together. People are sort of packed in. We're not doing that. We're continuing to keep the rows separated. We're asking that if you've been someplace where you might have been exposed, that you wear a mask when you come to church for, the 5 days after that. And if you have other issues, immunocompromised individuals in your family, we totally understand that you choose to wear a mask just to be extra extra careful.
And special.
And special, we're all special, so extra careful. So that's where we are. We know that we are all concerned about one another, and we will take the precautions we need to help keep one another safe. So with that, as an affirmation for peace in the Middle East, and in solidarity with our Muslim and Jewish brothers and sisters, all of us people of the book, we greet one another. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Peace be upon you.
And upon you.
Peace.
Shalom alaikum.
Alaikum shalom.
Well, as most of you know, I'm Reverend Vicki Elder, and it is my joy and honor to welcome you to Unity of Monterey Bay, a beloved community created with love and intention. Whether you are here with us in person or joining us virtually, we know that love knows no boundaries. We are one in spirit. And we affirm together, thank you, God, for this most amazing day. Miracle follows miracle, and wonders never cease. Unity of Monterey Bay is an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on this planet. We celebrate our oneness and honor the God of each of our understanding, affirming the innate good and divine essence within each and every individual. Would you please join me in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. And now we take an opportunity to drop even a little deeper into this sacred space as we continue to honor Black History Month, praying this prayer of empowerment. Most loving and merciful God, in whose law we find our guidance, in whose love we find our healing and joy, and in whose will we find our peace. Rule over our spirits in this hour, that we will go from this worship with the freedom of those who trust in you and have no anxiety for themselves. Empower us to be open to the seasons of life and give generously of our heart's love to all in need. Grant us silence of heart so we can grow in your word, and provide us with the means and the will to stay in loving and joyous relationships with one another and the world, worshiping in spirit and in truth. In Christ's name we pray. Amen and amen. And now's the time that we normally celebrate our children, but before we do that, Tomorrow is Alexander's birthday, so we're going to sing happy birthday to Alexander. Oh, he's going to be 22.
Wow.
You cannot be 22, because that means I'm 22 years older, because I remember the day you were born.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Alexander. Happy birthday to you. God is blessing you now. God is blessing you now. God is blessing you. You're wonderful. God is blessing you now. Happy birthday, Alexander.
And so now as we all bring the children in our lives to our minds, right now I have a grandson that's due in the next 3 weeks sometime, so I've got babies on my mind. And the children that are in our neighborhoods, the children that are in our families, the children that are in our communities, the children in our world. May we surround them all with our love and light. May we step into being the village that is helping all children to grow up with all that they need to have fulfilled lives. And so as we open our hearts and minds to receive the gifts and blessings of children, their open minds and their joyous hearts and their enthusiasm about all things, will you join me in our blessing? We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you just the way you are.
This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let
before we continue, I just want to also note that our children are our children no matter how old they get. And Kyle, Robin's son, has just left Hawaii for the Philippines for his next military assignment. So we all hold him in our prayers this morning as well. Seeing that safe journey there and fabulous experience there, and then returning home safe. So we're going to take this time now to center ourselves and deepen our inner blissful connection with Spirit. So taking a deep breath in, letting it out with an audible sigh, we allow all distractions to gently fade away as we invite the chime to call us into this sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and remind us of our inner connection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, we follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being. And with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into this divine flow. Again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine as we experience a transforming wave of gratitude. And with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all, embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say thank you, God. Now fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from the Daily Word, shared with permission of Unity, publisher of Daily Word, that can also be found at dailyword.com. And the word today is inspiration. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. I am grateful to those who inspire me. I admire and respect the sacred calling and work of innovative and groundbreaking thinkers and leaders. The work they have done to forge new paths and lead humanity in new directions inspires me. I've heard inspiration described as the breath of God, an inner quickening. This quickening is mine as I forge new paths and boldly journey forward, creating my new life. To keep divine inspiration flowing, I make time to rest in contemplative stillness. I begin each day with a prayer for receptive mind and heart. I pray for the courage and clarity to release my rigid expectations. I live in a state of gratitude for the release of my rigid expectations. I live in a state of gratitude for the inspiration that flows from God and the opportunity to share it. And from scriptures, then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. Genesis 2:7.
I am that I am.
and witness to the wisdom of the many paths to the sacred, we read from 5 sacred traditions on this morning's topic, the Christ within. From Islam, whoever sees me has seen God. From Sikhism, says Nanak, the Master is the Lord's image, the Lord in the Master pervasive, brother. Between these lies no difference. From Buddhism, he who sees the norm, he sees me. He who sees me, he sees the norm. From Hinduism, whenever truth is forgotten in the world and wickedness prevails, the Lord of love becomes flesh to show the way, the truth, and life to humanity. Such an incarnation is an avatar, an embodiment of God on earth. And from Christianity, no one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. John 1:18.
I can see a great peace too. I can see you whole and free. I behold the Christ in you. I can see this as you walk. I see this in all you do. I can see this as you talk. I behold God's love expressed. I can see you filled with power. I can see you ever blessed. See Christ in you, hour by hour. I behold the Christ in you. I can see that perfect one, led by God in all you do. I can see God's work is done.
That's an oldie. That song gives me sort of flashbacks, not in a bad way, but like I can, yeah, it puts me back to like pre-2000, sitting in the pew. I'm trying to think when we got rid of the hymnals. Maybe in the late 90s. No, we still had them in the... It's a great song. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is point out, down here in the corner, you can see our brand new Unity of Monterey Bay logo. And yeah. So so we have become a branded Unity church, which, God, how do I explain that? We're one of the last holdouts, let me put it that way. But when you get branded, you go through a process where you get the logo and the use of the logo, and of course it's a copyrighted logo. And almost all of the Unity churches are branded, so like when you go on the website and you see the logo, the idea is that it's a recognizable symbol that everyone knows that that's a Unity church. The thing that cracks me up is it's like, if you see that, then you know what to expect, right? No, you don't know what to expect. But you do know that it's a Unity church and you're going to get some brand of Unityism in that church. So anyway, I just put that there so you all could see it.
We're not replacing our harmony
Yeah.
symbol, it's in addition to.
We'll still be using our harmony symbol that we love and the necklace we wear and all that. But this just makes us recognizable because, as we know, the younger generations are, they use the internet way more than the rest of us. Can't decide if I'm still in the younger generations or I'm right on the cusp. I don't know. And they do look for those recognizable symbols to know what they're getting, and they They search us out on the internet long before they ever come to our church. So anyway, that's a step that we decided to take, and so you'll be seeing our logo. Okay. Most religions attempt to answer a couple of a lot of questions, but a couple of basic questions that we're focusing on. And that is, number one, what is the nature of God or the universe or the cosmos? And number two, what is the nature of human beings? Right? It's kind of the big questions of religions. Last week, we looked at Unity's answer to the first question, the nature of God. We looked at our first principle, which states that there is only one power and one presence, God the good. And we talked about how this means that God is everywhere present and that there is no place that God isn't. So this first principle that we looked at last week tells us about the nature of God, that God is everywhere present and inherently good. And it tells us about the nature of the cosmos, right? That the universe is infused with God, pervaded with the God stuff, whatever that stuff is. That's what the universe is made of. This week, we turn to Unity's answer to the second question, which is the nature of human beings. So, as I mentioned, there are many different versions of the principles, but one version of the second principle goes like this. Our essence is of God, therefore we are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus the Christ. And some other versions add or make use of the sentence, we are made in the image and likeness of God. So this second unity principle tells us first that our essence as human beings is of God, that we are made of the same stuff that God is made of. We're made of God's stuff. Isn't that cool? And there's wonderful logic here, because if the universe is made of God's stuff and we are made of God's stuff, that means that we and the universe are made of the same stuff. Which makes sense because our first principle also tells us that in essence, God, or that God stuff, is really all there is. So we're all part of that. It gets a little circular, but it's... The next part of the statement tells us that we are inherently good. Again, going back to the first principle, if God is good, and we are made in the same image and likeness as God, and we are made of the same essence as God, then we too are good. Now, this is huge for people who grew up in religions that taught original sin. Who grew up in a religion that taught original sin? This idea that human beings are born already blemished and in need of salvation, in need of cleansing, right? Are you aware that the concept of original sin is not biblical? I found that out when I was preparing for this. There's all these things, right, that we just assume are in the Bible, or that we assume have always been a part of Christian doctrine, and we're just taught to believe in them, right? But it turns out that original sin is something that was added to the doctrine later. In fact, I believe it was St. Augustine who introduced the concept of original sin, and that was not even until the 5th century. So unity, on the other hand, teaches that there is no original sin. We are not born already blemished. We are not born already sinners, sinful. Rather, we teach that we are original blessings. This is because, again, it's almost too simple. The logic is almost too simple to be, so if God is all there is, and God is good, and we are also made of God, then we too have to be good, right? I don't know how that seems pretty logical to me. You can't have a God of goodness that creates human beings in its own image and likeness and have that creation not be good. Doesn't make sense, right? Okay, now, does this mean that we are sinless? Or that we don't sin? Absolutely not. It's just we don't identify as sinners as our sort of main qualification, right? That, we're just born sinners. We don't identify that way. But that doesn't mean that we don't sin. And I think it's a really important distinction. Because we can take some of these principles and sort of twist them into this sort of human arrogance that I don't think is terribly helpful. But let's look at what sin means, and we've talked about this a lot. Sin means to miss the mark. We miss the mark all the time. Am I right? I miss the mark. We all miss the mark all the time because inherent in the human experience is that we are constantly forgetting our divine nature. Right? It's like Groundhog Day. Every day we wake up, we got to start all over. We just forget it all. We're constantly forgetting who we are as spiritual beings. We're forgetting our oneness with God. We forget what our true nature is. That causes us to sin. In fact, the Course in Miracles, what does it say? That there's only one type of sin, and that is forgetting who we are. And so we sin or we miss the mark every time we forget our dual nature as spiritual beings having a human experience. But since we were created in this way, how can that be a sin? How can the forgetting actually even be a sin, if you think about it? Because I sort of have to believe that our creation as fallible human beings, having an ego self, a material self, I think it's the grand design of things, right? Perhaps the whole journey is in forgetting and then remembering, right? So it's kind of like, how are we sinning if we're just doing what we were created to do, right? And so the journey is in that over and over, forgetting who we are, remembering and coming back, turning away from spirit and remembering and turning back. Okay. The next part of this statement, that's not included in every version, but I like it. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus the Christ. This tells us that this God stuff, this God essence that we are made of, had its perfect expression in the man Jesus of Nazareth, who was known as the Christ. He was known in his time by those who followed him as the Christ. And remember, Christ is not Jesus' last name. It's not Jesus Christ. Right? Mr. Christ. And so in order to sort of keep that straight in my mind, I've started referring to him as Jesus the Christ. That helps me remember that it's not just this sort of add-on. And as we know, the Christ in ancient Greek meant the anointed one. And the anointed one was what they knew as the Messiah that was expected to return to save the people, to save the Jews, and lead them back into their glory. And so Jesus, the Christ, or Jesus, the anointed one, was the one who did such a great job, such a bang-up job, of walking through this life as being at once fully human and fully divine. He did such a good job of that they called him the Christ. He was the one who understood and demonstrated his union with God so well that he claimed, I and the Father are one. Right? And he said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. He was the one who understood and demonstrated his union with all other human beings to the extent that he invited all of them to his table, both figuratively and literally. So that's why he gets the name the Christ, because he did all these things. And this radical example that he set, this demonstration of radical acceptance and compassion and inclusion, it was so extraordinary that we are still talking about it 2,000 years later. We're still telling the stories and talking about his significance all this time later. And so Jesus earned the name the Christ because he was able to perfectly align his ego self, or his material self, with his spiritual self. Okay? He lived those two things in perfect alignment, and that gave him great power. He had this sort of seamless blending of his two aspects, which we all have, right? We don't do as good of a job as seamlessly blending them. But he had this wonderful blending of his human self and spiritual self that gave him this great power. It gave him the power to heal people. It gave him the power to demonstrate the vast abundance of the universe. It gave him the power to raise his own consciousness to such a high vibrational level that in some mysterious way that I don't fully understand, he was able to actually overcome death and achieve eternal life. And so in unity, we call Jesus our way shower. We also call him our master teacher, our elder brother. And we see the extraordinary nature of his example at the same time that we know that theoretically we have the same potential. I say theoretically because we all know fully well that we do not live up to that same potential that Jesus did, and we don't claim to, nor claim to achieve or have achieved what he did. But we have the same potential within us. We say that in unity, we say that we differ from Jesus in the degree to which we have aligned our own consciousness with that truth of our spiritual nature and our human ego material nature. And we know, right, that Jesus told his disciples that they would do the same things that he had done and do even greater things. So Jesus set the bar very, very high for us. He demonstrated truth over and over in his life, but then he called us to follow him into our own demonstration of truth. He called us to leave our worldly possessions behind and follow him. Now, maybe he meant our actual worldly possessions, and some folks did do that, give up all their stuff and followed him. But maybe he meant for us to leave behind our material selves, our egos, all of that stuff that keeps us from fully experiencing and understanding and demonstrating our own inner divinity in the way that he did. So what is it that Jesus was trying to get us to follow him into? I believe Jesus was trying to get us to follow him into a plan for human living, which at the time was known as the way. This was the way in which we are able to operate as what I like to call double agents, meaning that we are at once human and divine. This is the trick, right? This is the challenge. So that means we fully embrace our humanity, just as Jesus did, eating, drinking, loving, fearing, praying, crying, getting frustrated, getting angry even, having the full spectrum of human emotion and experience, while at the same time never forgetting our essence as spiritual beings. So this is sort of where or probably unity, differs from some other ways of looking at this, in that I don't believe Jesus' message was that we needed to eradicate our humanness or our humanity. I don't believe he meant that we were to overcome or subjugate or do away with our humanity, that we were to bypass our humanness. Rather, I think Jesus' message was that we were to embrace our humanity and its inherent divinity within it, right? To become ever more fully human by becoming ever more fully divine. Or to become more fully divine by becoming ever more fully human. Well, I've had some influence in developing this way of thinking. This isn't something I just came up with. And as you know, Father Rohr has been a huge influence on me, the Franciscan priest and mystic. Every time I read and learn about him, I just think he's more brilliant. I'm ready to leave all my possessions and go study with him in Santa Fe, right? Seriously. So this whole phenomenon of God, of creation, of God showing up as material beings in the material world, he calls the incarnation. Okay, now, historically, we've tended to think of the incarnation as referring exclusively to God becoming flesh in the form of Jesus, right? That's what we think of as the incarnation. But Father Rohr uses the incarnation to refer to the creation of the whole material universe. It's what he calls spirit becoming matter. Okay? And he says Incarnation refers to the synthesis of matter and spirit. And then he explains that without some form of incarnation, God remains essentially separate from us and from all of creation. But in the incarnation, God, who is infinite love, incarnates that love as the universe itself. Does that make sense? And because, like C principle 1, that means that we also are of that also. We are also creations of love, if we're made of the same stuff. And God created the universe by incarnating that love into material form. That includes us and all of creation, essentially everything we know in the material universe. So Rohr explains that the incarnation, or otherwise known as creation, brings together these two elements that we tend to think of as separate, spirit and matter. We tend to think of them as being separate, right? And so in the incarnation, Rohr says that those two are revealed as not being separate, but actually being inextricable, being one. And he says that coming together of spirit and matter was demonstrated perfectly in the person of Jesus. It's not that Jesus is the only one that, we're all, it's very hard to explain, isn't it? Sometimes it's all just very hard to explain. Jesus demonstrated it in a way that we could see it. That's the point. Rohr says, the dualism of the spiritual and so-called secular is precisely what Jesus came to reveal as untrue and incomplete. So basically, it's not like over here is the spiritual and over here is the non-spiritual. There is no non-spiritual, right? So it's sort of a correction in our thinking, because even in unity, we tend to always separate out the spirit realm and the material realm. It's a construct for us to understand it, but the point is that it's actually seamlessly intertwingled. Who said intertwingled? Dan Schaefer. And so he says, Jesus came to model for us that these two seemingly different worlds are and always have been one. We just couldn't imagine it intellectually until God put them together in one body, Jesus, that we could see and touch and love. It's kind of a new way to think of Jesus. And so Jesus gave us a palpable, visible demonstration of this union of spirit and matter so that we could get it. Now, Father Rohr tells us that the incarnation, this process of spirit and matter becoming one, reveals two things about creation and therefore about us as human beings. One, that we are good, and two, that we are loved. So let me explain. By incarnating in human form in the man of Jesus, God was proclaiming that to be human is good. Otherwise, God would have had, something else. Jesus would have been an elephant thundering through the forest. Isn't that what we had last week? But Jesus was saying that to be human is good. Behold, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. That wasn't just about Jesus. That was about all of us. Okay? So God was saying that to have a human body is good. To have human emotions and desires and frailties and faults is good. Because Jesus displayed all of those things, and we know Jesus was good. And so because there's no separation between the sacred and the profane, the spiritual and the material, all of God's creation, both the potential and the manifest, both the seen and the unseen, it's all good because God is good. So do you understand what I'm saying? Because there was a long time when we tended to think of certain things as being sacred and certain things being profane. Some things being the realm of spirit and holy and sacredness, and other things just being sort of, dirty, fallible, whatever. So this is a different way of looking at this. And so this means, as I said, that not only Jesus, but in fact all of creation, all matter, all material things, including human beings, are sacred, are holy. Okay, then the second part is where he tells us that we are loved, because the incarnation, the process of creation, is an act of love. That infinite love of God, that infinite love that is God, revealing itself through creation. And I love the way Father Rohr explains this. He says, God loves things by becoming them. God loves things by becoming them. So the incarnation itself is an act of love on behalf of this infinite love that we call God. And so there we have it, what our true nature is as human beings: goodness and love. And Father Rohr refers to this as the universal Christ. It's that inherent goodness and divinity that is the essence not only of us, but of all things. So the universal Christ is that divinity that's in everything. But today we're talking specifically about us as human beings. And so it's our calling as human beings to live into that Christ nature, to live into that goodness and love, to believe it about ourselves, to believe it about others, and to believe it about all of creation, to stop dividing things into profane and sacred, right? That there aren't certain things that are holy and sacred. It's all holy and sacred. And I know there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, okay? Which I can't explain today. My head will explode. But it's a choice that we make to believe in the goodness of all things, in the divinity that infuses all things. And in order to do this, we have to let go of old ideas about the profanity, the sinfulness of the material world. We have to forget all that old indoctrination about human beings being born sinners, about the body being inherently bad. How could God create the body of God's stuff and yet the body is bad? That's not even good logic, right? So we have to start to let go of all of that indoctrination about human nature, including human sexuality, being dirty or sinful, about needing to overcome our humanity in order to become righteous spiritual beings. How are we going to overcome our humanity? It doesn't even make sense, right? But that's a lot of what we hear in spiritual talk. We got to overcome our humanness and be spiritual, right? So what Father Rohr is saying, and I believe it's completely aligned with Unity's second principle, is that there's nothing to overcome. We are already good. We are already fully spiritual, fully divine, because we are incarnations of God. We are already loved. We don't have to earn God's love or try to become loved by God. We are already loved because we know God loves things by becoming them. We are already spiritual because there is no separation between matter and spirit. We simply have to learn to embrace this as our true nature and to live into it. I recently read a tweet of Father Rohr's that said, "We are not human beings trying to become spiritual. We're already spiritual beings. Our job is to learn how to be good humans." Busted, right? It's a lot easier to be over here trying to be all spiritual, right? It's not about that. Let's focus on trying to learn to be good human beings. We already are spiritual. We don't need to get spiritual. So, as we look at this and embracing this as our true nature of being one of goodness and divinity, what do you think is harder? What is harder for you? To recognize goodness and divinity in yourself or in others? So, it can be pretty easy to recognize the divinity in certain folks, like Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Gandhi. Easy to see the divinity in them. What about people who don't seem so godly? And there's a lot of those. Can you see divinity in those people? Can you see the divinity in the homeless person? We got a lot of them now living under these overpasses, one quite near my house. We pass it almost every day. Can we see the divinity in those folks? Can you see the divinity in the tax collector? Now, it's almost tax season. Can you see the divinity in the tax collector, in that IRS person? Can you see the divinity in the prostitute? How about the guy who cut you off on the freeway? Okay, I'll use one of Vicky's. How about the person in the express line at the grocery store with more than 12 items? Can you see the divinity in that person while their basket is all full of things and you have like 11 items? Can you see the divinity? Can you see the face of God in the former president? I'm just saying. Can you? Can you see God in the face of the person that doesn't look anything like you, that doesn't speak like you, pray like you, eat like you, dress like you, live like you? Can you see the Christ in the person who irritates you? How about the person who offends you, who hurts you, who cheats you, who persecutes you, even who executes you? As we know Jesus did, right? What about the divinity in yourself? It's hard to say which one is harder. I think they're both hard. Okay, so what about on that day when you got up early and you did your prayer and meditation time and you got all your chores done and you got dressed and you finished your errands or your work? A day when you were more or less nice to everyone, when you didn't swear, you didn't lose your cool with anyone. Essentially, a day where you showed up as your best self. Could you see the divinity in yourself on such a day? But what about on that day where you were cranky and you didn't sleep well and you felt lazy and you didn't get anything done and you watched Netflix all day and you ate all the chocolate bonbons and you were irritable? Or that day that you just didn't feel good enough. You just felt you weren't up to snuff. How about that day that you just didn't feel a part of? You felt not worthy. Maybe a day when you let yourself down or you let others down. How about that hopefully rare but painful day when you can't even stand to look at yourself in the mirror? Can you see the divinity in yourself on such a day? It turns out that truly getting unity's second principle is a lot more difficult than it seems at first glance. Again, there's getting it intellectually, and then there is getting it in a real way. Are we okay? Yeah? Okay. There's getting it intellectually, and then there's getting it in a real way at your core, having that true knowing. Really integrating and understanding this principle means recognizing the divine in others and in ourselves, even or especially when it's not readily apparent. Rohr says that God must reveal himself in you before God can reveal himself to you. So we can't have an experience of God if we can't come to see God in ourselves and in others, and in fact, in all things. I had an experience I want to share with you many years ago, probably 10, 11, 12 years ago, when I was a prayer chaplain, and we were asked one day to participate in an angel walk. We haven't done one of those in a long time, but you all know what that is, right? This was the first time I'd ever done it, and it was a new experience to me. And we were just told to say whatever affirmations came to your mind as the people walked through the two center rows. Well, I was a little nervous because this was new to me. And so as we were lining up and getting ready for folks to start coming through, I quick said a prayer, what do I say? What do I say? And I got like instantly, say, I behold the Christ in you. And I was like, okay. Like, that's not something we say a lot around here, right? It's not just something that rolls off the tongue. I behold the Christ in you, but that's what I heard. So I said, all right. And so I was in the line, and as people started coming down the line, I touched each person gently on the shoulder and whispered to them, I behold the Christ in you. Well, it felt really weird at first. But I kept on doing it, and it started to feel pretty cool. It started to feel really good, actually. And then I started to feel people's reactions. And I was beginning to really enjoy it. It was a very cool experience. But then I looked down the line and I saw a couple people coming that I was mildly uncomfortable with, let's say. This would never happen today because I love each and every one of you 110 gazillion %. It wasn't any big deal. It was just somebody I had had a minor conflict with, and I saw them coming down the line. No biggie, but I thought, oh my goodness, here they come. I have to say it to them too. I mean, it was just in an instant. And so that person or those couple of people approached, and I whispered to them with as much earnestness as I possibly could, I behold the Christ in you. Something happened to me in that moment. Something broke open in me when I did that to the person that wasn't my favorite person. I got teary-eyed. I was like deeply moved. And I think what had happened was I had risen ever so slightly above my ego self to be able to behold the divinity, the goodness, the humanity in someone who wasn't my favorite person, someone who I didn't adore, someone who wasn't Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama. And I had been rewarded for having done that by having this instant spiritual growth. I was like the Grinch whose heart grew 3 sizes that day when I did that. This is what Jesus was trying to teach us. That by embracing and accepting and healing and eating with all of those folks who weren't probably his favorite folks, right? People who were considered outcasts, the sinners, the untouchables. By loving them unconditionally, even the folks who denied him, who persecuted him, the people who betrayed him, the people who ultimately executed him. This is how we grow spiritually, and it's how we embrace our own divinity. When we open our hearts to see the divinity in others, especially those in whom it is least apparent, we are rewarded by becoming more fully human ourselves. Rohr says that the true and essential work of all religion is to help us to see the divine in everything. To recognize and recover the divine image in everything. And so that's what these first 2 principles have really been about and are really about. Learning to see the divine in everything. Father Rohr says that if this is hard for us, if this is new for us, we can start with things like rocks. Can we see the divine in a rock formation? Then we can move from rocks to plants and trees. And from there we can move to animals and birds and insects. And then to humans. And then finally to ourselves and to those who aren't our favorite people. It's a process. We work our way up so that soon we can see the divine in everything. And so I issue this challenge to you this week. See if you can go through this next week with those words in mind, those words of the song we sang, I behold the Christ in you. See if you can say it to yourself in the mirror. See if you can utter it to yourself when someone cuts you off on the freeway, when someone bugs you at work, or someone is demonstrating their human fallibility and frailty and woundedness and imperfection. So I'm going to close now by saying it to all of you. I behold the Christ in you, and you, and you, and you, and all of you. I feel like romper room. Remember romper, bumper, stomper, boo? Do it this week. It got me choked up right now. It will move you. So that's my challenge to you this week. Next week, y'all are going to report back about how you did. Thank you.
I let go of the world's expectations. I let go of all view of who I am. I let go of the world's expectations. expectations. I let go of all view of who I am. I return to the one who created me. I return to the spirit I am. I return to the one who created me. I return to the spirit I am. I let go of the world's expectations. I let go of all view of who I am. I let go of the world's expectations. I let go of all view of who I am.
So we have an opportunity to now spend just a few moments taking this message and these teachings deeper into our hearts and into our souls, where we can really integrate them into our being. So just getting comfortable and relaxing, closing your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Taking some slow, deep breaths, and as you breathe in, just saying to yourself, I am goodness. And as you breathe out, I am divinity. Breathing in deeply, I am goodness. Exhaling, I am divinity. And now breathing in again, this time saying, you are goodness. And exhaling, you are divinity. And finally breathing in, we are goodness. We are divinity, as we exhale and release and let go into this present moment. Feeling that release. As the song says, letting go of all expectations of the world. Letting go of all view of who I am. All these things we have to do and be every day in our waking hours. In our times of meditation and contemplation, we can just shed it all. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be anything. I can just rest in the truth of my own goodness and my own divinity. I can return to the one who created me. The one who created me in its own image and likeness of beauty and love and peace and truth. I can return to the spirit that I am. Not that I am becoming. Not that I have to strive to be, but that I already am. And so breathing in again, I am goodness. And exhaling, I am divinity. We are goodness. We are divinity. I invite you to just rest for a few moments, letting those words sink ever deeper into your being in the silence.
return to the spirit I am. I let go of the world's expectations. I let go of a view of who I am. I let go of the world's expectations. I let go of a view of who I am.
And so we begin to gently bring this time to a close, bringing our awareness back to this room and this time and this place, but doing so with an ever greater awareness of this place that we know we can return to in any time to experience the truth of our being. And so we vow to return more and more each day to this place, to get grounded in the truth of who we are. And we are so grateful for this opportunity and for this community that supports us in remembering who we are. And we say, thank you, God. Amen.
So before we begin to talk about the offering period, I wanted to share with you a little bit about Colleen. Colleen is diabetic, has been for many, many years, and she was experiencing symptoms this morning she thinks are related to her diabetes. And so she's gone home to rest, and I'm sure folks will check on her later. So not to worry. I'm happy to, I thought it was my fourth Sunday and I was supposed to be here anyway, so apparently it's divine order, so here I am.
Put the mic closer to you, Linda.
Beg your pardon?
Just bring the mic closer to you.
Closer to me.
There you go.
Like that? Okay. I'm so tall, I seldom need to do that. Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, our treasure, and talent in order to sustain this spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation and abundance in joyous generosity. We transform all appearance of fear or lack into faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. And so, as I'm wont to do, one tiny short story. When I was introduced to Unity, I was about 40, so that was about almost 36 years ago. And early, it was a relief to find a place that didn't think I was born sinful and all the things that Michelle covered today. But it had a few suggestions that I wasn't very comfortable with. And one of them was this idea of tithing. So at the time, I was a single parent, raising 2 emotionally disturbed special needs children with a full-time job. Making the mortgage every month was not a sure thing and a big deal. So the idea of giving any money to anybody was way far out of my consciousness. But by the end of the prosperity course that I took there at Unity of Palo Alto, I thought, you know, there's some part of this that makes sense and is resonating with me. I think I'll try it. So I set up a regular tithe, which I think was a total of $10 a month, something like that, which I was very nervous about. I didn't have $10 a month. And the result of doing that, I thought, would do some good in the world. Well, hopefully it did. But the real result of doing that was the good it did in me. It freed me up from holding so tightly to the money I had. I became less afraid, and I didn't miss the $10 at all and went on to prosper in many ways, including financially. So if you haven't had that experience, it's a freeing, life-affirming one, and I encourage you to give it a try, including if it's only $10 or less. So with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, that we have enough, and that there always is enough, both to have and to share. Again, we are grateful to all of you for your online giving through our website at unityofmontereybay.org and through your mailed-in offerings, including those who've set up automatic giving with your banking institutions. We are truly blessed. For those of you who are here in person, the baskets are in the back by the door. We're still not passing them. I trust we will do that eventually. And we encourage you to give what you feel comfortable with. And now please join me in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good, divine love flowing through me, blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God. I want to also thank the providers of our special music, including Daniel Nahmad, Richard Burdick. Nope. I don't have to do that. Okay. We're thankful, and she's going to tell you the who. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Linda.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours, and I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe. The only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Ooh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong when I think I am weak, and you say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours, and I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. Oh, I believe. Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God. You have every victory. Ooh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours.
Okay, I'm tired now. So we do want to thank Lauren Daigle for that awesome song, Jason Ingram, Paul Mabry, Richard Burdick, Bill Provost, and Daniel Namod for our music today.
Yay.
And of course, Denise
Our
and John
music
Talon on
team,
drums, and
Michelle.
then Robin.
Awesome.
Yay!
Yay.
For our announcements, we're just going to refer you to our e-blast, where you can find out all of the various things going on. We do have class resuming in a couple weeks and various things going on, so check that out. As we bring our service to a close this morning, as always, we are so grateful that you have joined us here in person, or whether you're watching us virtually or checking us out later on our YouTube channel. We hope we've made you feel at home in our Unity of Monterey Bay community, and we want you to know that wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Our chaplain today is, who are you pointing at? Oh, Molly is our chaplain on duty today. So Molly is available to pray with you after the service. And thank you, Molly, for your service. So I think with all that, we're just going to form our closing circle for our prayer for protection and our peace song. Are you dragging my husband into the circle, Joyce? I know, they're cold, aren't they? My hands are not usually cold, but they're cold right now. Okay, so let's first hold Colleen, our beloved Colleen, in our hearts, knowing that we just see her resting and recuperating and returning to her normal, spunky, wonderful self. Holding all those on our prayer list, all of those in our own lives and around the world in need of that uplifting prayer this morning as we join in our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. Oops. The love of God enfolds us. I am love. Power of God protects us. I am power. The presence of God watches over us. I am presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. It's a lot of years saying it that way.